Now, I don't know if you guys have been paying attention or not, but lately there's been an attack on freedom of speech online. You have platforms like YouTube, you have platforms like Patreon, you have platforms like Twitter, you have platforms like Facebook, and also platforms like MasterCard and the payment channels, who are colluding together to silence people's opinions that they don't agree with. Now, I don't know about you, but in my mind, freedom of speech is an absolute right. It's a concrete right that every single human being on this planet must have. But one of the primary reasons why we have the ability to do what we do is because of the fundamental rights that we can speak our mind. Now, for society to evolve together as a society, to challenge ideas, to communicate properly, to negotiate properly, to think outside the box, we need to have the fundamental rule of law, which is freedom of speech is absolute. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, well, I'm kind of happy they took off person X from these platforms. Cool. That's your opinion, all the power to you. That's your expression of speech, that you agree that this person is saying bad things in your mind. But don't forget this. Today, they can be approving your thoughts. Tomorrow, your thoughts may not be approved. Right? Who's to say that tomorrow what you're saying is now against their agenda? The agendas always change. At the end of the day, what we're seeing, we are seeing the end results of puppet masters puppeteering us, the pawns, right? Using certain individuals as pawns. Listen, either we have total freedom of speech or we don't. And we can just use today's example in the world where we see what happens when there's no freedom of speech. It's an unjust society. So I think it's a little bit scary what's happening today with the whole acceptance of a lot of people agreeing that we should silence people. This is crazy. Imagine all of a sudden the government changes a policy that overnight goes against your religious ideologies, for example. Or it goes against your political viewpoints, or they discriminate against you somehow, whatever. Imagine that happens overnight. Imagine you don't have the legal right to voice your opinion. And this is what's happening today. And so I think there has to be more education brought to light about freedom of speech. I think more people need to speak up, and big round of a fucking applause to Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris, Dave Rubin, and others with Patreon who said, enough's enough. You're not going to control my thoughts. You're going to tell me what I can and how I can say it. I'm going to find alternative ways. And one of the alternative ways is they're going to be starting to accept crypto, which is fucking awesome. Which brings me to my second point. I think we as a society obviously can't control the government that much. We have seen in history that there's never been a government that's been 100% peaceful towards its citizens. There's always been some form of discrimination or oppression, some form of negative attributes governments have imposed through sheer force, violence towards their citizens. That being said, obviously we can't change the mind of this government collective. All we can do is vote for the best and improve systems. However, what we can do right now, what we do have right now, is a means of communication, means of exchange, means of dialogue to counteract certain future regulatory changes they make. So, privacy and data is really important. I think platforms like Patreon and like YouTube here and like Facebook will be going head to head with private decentralized platforms in the next 10 years. I think it's going to be a massive war between who's going to get most of the users in the future. And for me, I'm leaning towards new platforms coming out. And obviously it's an uphill battle. You're going against gigantic, behemoths, David versus Goliath. But these are like simple tips that anyone can do. For example, tip number 1, use a VPN. All right. So what a VPN does is a virtual private network. It masks your IP, and what your IP is pretty much your digital representation of who you are online. It shows you geographically where you are. It shows you which internet provider you're coming from and shows which device you're coming from. Pretty much is your thumbprint. It represents who you are online. So what a VPN does, virtual private network, it masks that. And there's a bunch of different ones out there. VPN Express, VPN, NordVPN. There's a bunch. Go Google it. But VPN would be one, both mobile and desktop for VPNs. Number 2, messaging apps. I'm a firm believer in using encrypted messaging apps. So my personal favorite that I like to use is Signal. So I use Signal on a daily basis, or Keybase, but Keybase is not the best UI UX. But Signal is really good on mobile. I do 99% of my communication on Signal. Don't touch text messaging. Text messaging is a joke, absolute joke. So that's number 2, Signal, or encrypted messaging app. Number 3 is a browser online. Most people use Chrome or Firefox or Safari. You can use different ones, different browsers. For example, you have Opera, which is cool. You have a built-in VPN in Opera, and you have the option of going on the Tor network, Onion and Tor, if you want that option. Or you can use Brave browser, which has a bunch of built-in ad blockers. But for me, I use Opera. That's number 3, different browser for your own protection. Number 4 is buy Bitcoin. I'm not a fan of fiat currencies. If you look at historics, or if you look at history, the average life length of a fiat currency is 27 years, right? And so lately with quantitative easing since 2008, with inflation rates, I don't have any faith in the dollar. I don't have any faith in the euro. I think it's all going to collapse in a lifetime. Buy Bitcoin, use it as store of value. Bitcoin is the biggest and strongest network on the planet. It's the most decentralized network on the planet. And it's the best store of value, digital store of value in regards to physical, for example, like gold. So we have now number 1, VPN, number 2, Signal, so encryption app, number 3, browser, and number 4, Bitcoin. Number 5 is 2FA. So most people, when it comes to security online, they'll use, for example, text messaging, like send a code or email. I would recommend they use something called a 2FA YubiKey. And so this takes one step above and beyond for your security and protection online. So traditionally, whether it's a text message for 2FA, which I don't recommend, or a little bit better, you have a app message like Google Auth or Authy. So for example, if you log into your Facebook, it's going to say, hey, we just sent a code to Authy. You got 45 seconds because every 45 seconds is a new code. What the YubiKey does is a digital little small USB key. Instead of you going to your app, it's a physical USB key. So then you have to plug it in, right? So even if, for example, hackers or individuals are able to go to your Facebook, you have this one extra step. So these are like simple steps that give citizens back more mobility. It gives citizens back more privacy and empowerment to conduct themselves when it comes to freedom of speech. Because money is a form of freedom of speech. That's why I mentioned Bitcoin. So these are some ideas I just wanted to riff with you, I would like to know your thoughts about it. I think this is all part of the process. There's a Buddhist saying it is as it should be. And so maybe we have to go through this period of time of like, hey, what is freedom of speech? Why are we doing this? But maybe this is really good. At the end of the day, we realize that decentralized platforms like YouTube, like Twitter, like Facebook, like Patreon are not the solutions for the future. They serve their purpose for the last decade or so. Now we need new solutions, more decentralized, open, robust solutions where anybody, anywhere, regardless of who you are, participate in the network. Okay, guys, I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. Leave a comment below this video, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace.